Hello everybody, this is David. Welcome back to my channel. Well, this is the next in our series on our study of sin, Hamartiology. And I'm basing these videos on a book that was written in 1897 by Professor John Laidlaw, who was a professor at the University of Edinburgh. And it's taken from a series of lectures or lessons that he gave to his students in the 1800s, and it all coalesced into a book in 1897, and it's quite a fascinating book. He was a professor at New College in Edinburgh, and the teaching on it is quite amazing. So I wanted to have a look at the first lesson is going to be, or this first video is going to be looking at the Bible's teaching on sin as fact and sin as it now is as we experience it. So if you're ready, let's have a look. So in this video we're going to be looking at sin as fact, its extent and its nature. It has to be said firstly that the Bible has two kinds of teaching about sin. The first one is the fact of sin, its extent and nature as it now exists in human experience. And it has much to say about the effect of sin and what we already know by nature and conscience, although we may not know too much about it. The Bible does not need to reveal the fact that man is a sinner and the world is full of sin. We already know that, but it shows a depth in these facts which are unknown without the Bible. For example, God's revelation is a light shining in a dark place, of which it reveals the darkness. It discovers so much of the sinfulness of sin that we may say of the whole Bible, what is said, especially of the law, that by it the knowledge of sin, or by it is the knowledge of sin. We get the knowledge of sin because of what the Bible says, and what it says about this is what we're going to be looking at in this video. And the other part of the teaching of the Bible is its origin and where it comes from and all of that, and where it leads to, which will be what we'll be looking at in these videos. But for this one, we're going to be looking at the names and definitions and classes and kinds of sin. For example, as described in Numbers chapter 15, where it describes sin as sins of ignorance and sins of presumption or high-handedness. And the psalmist prays in Psalm 19 that he may be cleansed from the first kind, that is sins of ignorance, and kept from the last kind, which is sins of presumption. In Psalm 32, he looks at it from a different angle, which is as sin. He looks at it as a failure, a missing of man's true purpose, as transgression, that is departure from or offence against God's law. For example, sins of omission or sins of commission. He looks upon it as iniquity, that is wrong done to God and to man. In other places in the Epistle of John, it's declared to be the opposite of light, that is darkness, the opposite of love, that is hatred, the opposite of God, for it is of the wicked one. In other words, it's from the devil. So we see that the Bible takes the strongest view of sin, and it has the right to do so, because it tells us of how sin may be put away and overcome. It would be mere cruelty to tell a sick man of his illnesses, and not tell him how to get healed. If you didn't tell him how to get cured of his illnesses, that would be cruelty. So the Bible does us a great kindness, actually, to be honest. It does us a great kindness to tell us that we are sinners, what sin is, but also that there is an infallible remedy, and that we have a great physician, the world's best doctor, to cure us of sin. And that is absolutely kind. That is total kindness that the Bible tells us about. So the main lines of the Bible teaching about sin, as it is now, are three things, which is universal guilt, the corruption of the heart, and inherited sinfulness, or what is more usually called original sin. So let's have a look now at universal guilt. Now, apart from the Bible, people know and confess in a way that everybody goes wrong. There's no one perfect, is the common phrase, is how people put it. But here it's taught with a thoroughness which the unassisted human conscience does not attain. For example, St. Paul's demonstration in the first chapter of Romans to about the middle of the third regarding sin, Romans chapter 1 to 3, quite incredible about the sinfulness of man. There is precise truth which he is teaching here, in that all men capable of conscious moral action do on their own account or of their own free will actually transgress God's law. And he works it out step by step that the Jews who have the law do it in one way, and the Gentiles who don't have the law do it in another way. So he reaches the conclusion in Romans chapter 3 verse 19 that they are all under sin, or every man, every person are all under sin, that all have actually sinned and do in their own life and character come short of the glory of God. Now, why does he do this? For what purpose does he take to prove this? That every mouth may be stopped, and that all the world may be brought under the judgment of God, and that all may be convinced that there is no difference and there is no distinction. That in other words, no person is better than another person, because everybody is a sinner. And to say that the aim of this universal and terrible verdict, as I've just said, that everyone is a sinner, is actually a deep, deep kindness. It's to show that there is no difference or no exception to the fact that in the sight of God's holy law, every conscious human life, every person is under guilt on account of their own sin, and that there is no difference or of merit or worth before God in respect of salvation. In every case, salvation is grounded in the righteousness of Christ received by faith. So, how are we to use this truth? How are we to do it rightly and not to do it wrongly? Just to keep on saying that all men are sinners, so you are a sinner, may be of little use. So how do we handle the truth that there is no difference, as to rouse or wake up the conscience of people of the message that there is a difference in sins and sinners, and that he that had delivered me unto you has the greater sin. So what does that mean? For example, if we take two people that owe a debt, say one owed a £500 debt and one had a 50 pence debt, there's degrees of guilt there, degrees of debt. So when we come back to the point where there is no difference, that is, in all of us without exception have come short of the glory of God, that is, has failed of our chief end, the chief end of man. In other words, those two people that owe the money, the £500 and the 50 pence, they're both debtors. There's no difference between them. They both owe some money. So let's see, who do we owe a debt to? So we've failed in our chief duty as humanity to glorify God. None of us have sought after God, none of us. So therefore, what we mean then is that sin has no meaning to us until we see that it is denying God his due. That is, we've put something or someone before or instead of him. Against thee only have I sinned, as the psalmist says, or King David says. The right use of this verdict, that the condemning sentence of God's law written over every human life is to shut us up to Christ and his grace. It beats down that foolish hope which the unconvinced heart builds upon its own imagined goodness or betterness, or I'm not so bad compared to other people. No, God's holy standard disallows that plea. So, in this matter of acceptance with him, there are no exceptions. When the debtor has nothing to pay, for example, those two people that owed £500 or 50 pence, if they had nothing with which to pay their debt with, they're both going to be in problems. The debt is just as bad, just as difficult when you've got nothing to pay it with, if you owe £500 or 50 pence. But then God's free and glorious grace has the same motto, no difference. In other words, a free and full salvation to everyone that believes. I think I'll leave the video there for now. I think next video we'll be looking at the corruption of the heart, and we'll just go and have a look at that. But in this video, I just wanted to look at the fact of sin, that everybody is a sinner and there is no difference between one person or another. We are all in the same standing before God, which is actually good news. Good news that we can do nothing about it, that we've got nothing to pay our debt with, but that God, through Jesus Christ, has paid it for us. So I want to thank you for joining me in this video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.